The Secret Doctrine of the Rosicrucians. What is known as the Secret Doctrine of the Rosicrucians is an extensive body of esoteric teaching and occult lore, which has been transmitted from master to student, from hierophant to the new initiate, for countless generations. Seldom has any part of the secret doctrine been committed to writing or exposed to public view on the printed page until the present generation. Previous to that time, the little that was written or printed concerning this body of teachings was disguised in the vague terms of alchemy and astrology, so that the same would have one meaning to the average reader and another and closer meaning to those who possessed the key to the mystery. The frequent references in the ancient books to sulfur, mercury, and other chemical elements, and to the philosopher's stone, etc., were all intended to indicate certain portions of the teachings of the secret doctrine to those who already possessed the key. The secret doctrine of the Rosicrucians is believed by those best informed to have been built up gradually, carefully, and slowly by the old occult masters and adepts from the scattered fragments of the esoteric teachings which were treasured by the wise men of all races. The legend runs that these fragments of the secret doctrine were the scattered portions of the old esoteric teachings of ancient Atlantis, the bits of the great mass of the Atlantean occult teachings which were scattered in all directions by the great cataclysm which had destroyed that great continent. The few survivors of the Atlantean civilization carefully preserved these fragments of truth and passed them on to their chosen students and capable descendants. The old masters who made it the object of their lives to gather together once more these scattered fragments and to thus reconstruct the occult doctrine of the Atlanteans found a portion of their material in Egypt, in India, in Persia, in Chaldea, in Media, in China, in Assyria, and in ancient Greece, and also in the mystic records of the Hebrews, such as the Kabbalah and the Zohar. The common source, however, may be regarded as distinctly Oriental. The great philosophies of the East, excuse me, drink some water here. The great philosophies of the East, in fact, may be said to have been built upon the base of these still more ancient teachings. Moreover, the great Grecian secret teachings are believed to have been based upon knowledge obtained from this same common source. So at the last, the secret doctrine of the Rosicrucians may be said to be the secret doctrine of Atlantis, transmitted through the descendants of the people of that great center of occult knowledge. The following quotation from a writer who himself has gathered together many bits of the ancient wisdom may be interesting. Speaking of these ancient teachings, he says, "The teaching has come down to the present age through the corridors of time, from the dim ages of past eras, races, and schools of thought. Even those highest in the ancient occult councils, however, are unable to trace the teachings in an unbroken, direct line further back than the time of Pythagoras, about 500 BC, and a little later in ancient Greece, although they find many references thereto and extracts therefrom in some of the older records of ancient Egypt and Chaldea, which serve to show that the schools of Pythagoras and other ancient Grecian occultists were founded on occult instruction still more remote, received in a direct line of succession of teachers and pupils, extending over centuries. Investigators have found traces of the teachings in the records of Persia and Media, and it is believed that the inspiration for the original philosophical teachings of Gautama, the founder of Buddhism, was received from the same sources. Traces are also found in the Hebrew esoteric teachings. The writer continues, "The Grecian teachings were undoubtedly obtained directly from Egyptian sources, though through through Pythagoras. The relation between the early Grecian teachings and philosophies and the older school of Old Egypt being very close and intimate. Pythagoras is known to have received instruction from Egyptian and Persian hierophants. There is to be found the closest resemblance between the ancient Grecian teachings and those of the Egyptian esoteric fraternities. Some of the teachers, however, hold that the Grecian and Egyptian schools, respectively, were but two separate offshoots of an original and older teaching which had its origin in the lost continent of Atlantis. There are many traditions connecting the teachings with Atlantis, and it is possible that both Greece and Egypt received it from this common source, instead of Greece being indebted to Egypt for the line of transmission. But be this as it may, it is a fact that all of the traces of teaching that the various occultists gather from the traditions, scraps of doctrine, and legends regarding Atlantis can be reconciled with the best esoteric and occult knowledge had by the race today. The fragments of the Egyptian esoteric teachings, many of which are still preserved in an undoubted direct line of succession, are practically identical in fundamental and basic points with the Grecian occult teachings. And as has been said, the Persian, Median, and Chaldean legends and traditions, and scraps of teachings which have been preserved, show a common source or origin with those of Egypt and ancient Greece. The writer adds, we are speaking now of the historical view of the subject today. The occult traditions hold that the teaching is in some form is as old as the race itself, and has been known to the advanced minds of every great civilization of the past, many of which disappeared thousands of years ago, all traces of them having been lost to the present subrace. The traditions hold that the teaching was handed down from the elder brethren of the race, certain advanced souls who appeared in the earlier days in order to plant the seeds of truth so that they would grow, blossom, and bear fruit throughout the ages to follow. We do not ask you to accept this statement. It is not material, for the teaching bears evidence of its own truth within itself, without needing the force of such high authority. The ancient tradition is mentioned merely that the student may know that the same is accepted as truth by many of the highest occult authorities and teachers. The 7 aphorisms of creation. In the present book, the writer has presented for the consideration of his readers the 7 aphorisms of creation of the Rosicrucians, which embody the fundamental principles of the Rosicrucian secret doctrine. He has also reproduced the leading secret symbols of the Rosicrucians, which relate to the 7 aphorisms of creation. The student who will master the principles herein set forth will have brought himself to a plane of thought which will naturally tend to place him in rapport with the higher teachers of the Rosicrucians, and to render him subject to the offer of still higher information, should he desire to proceed further into this great study. Let the student always remember the ancient axiom, when the pupil is ready, the master appears. But the pupil is not ready until he has mastered the elementary instruction, such as given in the pages of this book. It is not claimed, however, that in the pages of this book are given all the secret teachings of the Rosicrucians, such as their formulas and methods of mental alchemy and spiritual transmutation. Such information cannot be broadcast, for reasons which will be apparent to every earnest and intelligent student. But on the other hand, such information cannot be withheld from those who are ready to receive it, and who are moved by the proper motives in seeking to acquire the secret knowledge. When the student learns how to give the right knock, then will he find proven the old promise, knock, and it shall be opened unto you. The symbol of the rosy cross. The well-known symbol of the Rosicrucians, the rosy cross, appears in several forms, as for instance, the cross surmounted by the rose, the sword, the cross handle, attached to the rose, the cross surmounted by the crown, a modification of the phallic cross. The explanation of the general symbol is sevenfold, the three highest being reserved for initiates of a certain rank only, and therefore cannot be stated here. Below follow several of the meanings which we are permitted to translate and explain here. The cross, surmounted by the rose, indicates that the rose, the mystic symbol of the divine, can be attained only by the suffering of mortal life, symbolized by the cross. 2. The sword attached to the rose indicates that the sword of the Spirit must be actively employed in the battle of life in order to win the reward of the rose being the reward bestowed by the queen upon the victorious knight in the olden days. Number 3, the cross surmounted by the crown indicates that the suffering of mortal existence, borne by the faithful disciple of truth, will inevitably be rewarded by the attainment of the crown of mastery. Every cross has its crown, and no cross, no crown, being old aphorisms seeking to express this truth. The modified phallic cross indicates the sexual duality of the manifested universe, the presence and activity of the universal male principle and the universal female principle, respectively. The modified phallic cross of the Rosicrucians, however, must not be taken to indicate any relationship of the Rosicrucians with the gross forms of phallic worship. However, the latter is merely the distorted shadow of the truth and must not be mistaken for the reality. Concluding this introductory statement and inviting you to enter into the study of the secret doctrine of the Rosicrucians, let us ask you to carefully consider the following words of an ancient aphorism. The possession of knowledge, unaccompanied by a manifestation and expression in action, is like the hoarding of precious metals by the miser, a vain and foolish thing. Forget not the law of use in this and all other things.